Right down the chute, Kevin Durant.
NBA Lockdown with Bruce Bowen.
Gets it to James. Here's a three for the win. Good! It is good!
The NBA Lockdown podcast with Bruce Bowen. Along with three-time NBA champion Bruce Bowen, here's ESPN.com NBA columnist Israel Gutierrez.
Welcome into another edition of the NBA Lockdown podcast with Bruce Bowen. I'm Israel Gutierrez. We got one game in the Eastern Conference Finals in the books. Let's discuss.
Rebound, Indiana. They can run it out. Donald Sloan takes it at half court. Miami won't foul, and the Indiana Pacers go wire to wire and take the Miami Heat in Game 1, 107-96.
That was Mark Kestisher on ESPN Radio with the final call there. Told you the final score, 107-96. Quite the surprise, not necessarily the result being the surprise, but the way the game played out, the style of play. You had Indiana looking like an offensive juggernaut, which they very rarely do, scoring 107 points, shooting 51.5% from the field, getting a variety of players involved, 6 players in double figures, the 5 starters plus C.J. Watson. Bruce, what surprised you most about this one? Because there's plenty to choose from, but I'll just, without giving you options, just say what surprised you most about this one.
I think the willingness to try something new in Game 1 for Coach Spoelstra. And what I mean by that is trying something new is, okay, LeBron, you're going to start at the 4 spot, guarding David West. Now, this is the difficult part about trying something new quite like that against a team that really has a good matchup against your squad. You got LeBron more isolated on the block now. You have David West taking advantage of that. David didn't worry about trying to shoot jump shots over LeBron James. He said, I'm going to what I'm good at. I'm going to what I'm comfortable with. And that's the banging style. And LeBron, I know that we talk about him and being a guy that can do everything, but to throw him in that situation at that particular moment, I thought that was a little strange because he doesn't play down low like that in a constant situation. So here it is. You're taking LeBron and putting him in an uncomfortable spot where David West is comfortable.
You know what? I'm surprised. I'm surprised that you said that because, to me, a lot of people would have been surprised by the Pacers' offense, maybe surprised by, the fact that the Heat had a big game in the paint with, 54 points in the paint, and yet only got 15 free throw attempts. But I absolutely agree with you. I think that is the biggest surprise to me was Eric Spoelstra's decision to start Shane Battier, to not start Udonis Haslem, to basically choose offense over defense against this team when essentially what you're doing by going that route, by going small, going back to what you've done in the past but hasn't really worked especially well. You've beaten them with Shane Battier as a starter, but it's not really the best option for you. What you're doing is you're giving them you're allowing them an opportunity to really be good offensively. Okay, you're sort of cracking the door open and saying, hey, here you go, Pacers. We're going to go small, which gives you an opportunity to play some quality offense against our smaller team because the Pacers' eyes light up. Not necessarily that they're intimidated when Udonis Haslem's in there, but when they go completely non-traditional and go Chris Bosh at the 5, like you said, LeBron at the 4, or even Shane Battier, whichever one you want to call it, their eyes absolutely light up because they don't really have to execute especially well when they can, be bullies in the paint and get a bunch of offensive rebounds and just back you down, for example, the way David West did, like you mentioned. So that, to me, I thought was a mistake by Eric Spoelstra. He was being a little bit stubborn by sort of rolling the dice and saying our offense is going to be better than your offense when we go small. And, frankly, it just wasn't. You saw Chris Bosh missed his first 2 threes from the corner, and to me, I thought that was – not that was a wrap right there, like that ended the game, but that was a sign that said, look, you're taking a gamble, and so far, you're losing.
Well, I wouldn't say it was necessarily a gamble, Izzy. I'd say it was different because you're not accustomed to seeing that team rotate out of those positions. You saw the three-point shots that Indiana got because of that lineup. I don't think it was necessarily thought about as far as the rotating aspect of now, whereas LeBron is usually on the wing rotating. Now you got to rotate from the 4 position, and it's different. Yep. There's different communication keys with the bigs. Usually the 4 and 5 man are communicating with one another and letting the 3 perimeter guys just roam all over the place. Now you put LeBron in a situation where he's so accustomed to being on that wing, it kind of takes him out of his continuity and his comfort and flow on the defensive end.
Right, and here was Eric Spoelstra on the subject of defense for the Miami Heat.
If you would say coming into the game that we'd score 96 and have over 50 in the paint, I would say we'd be in the driver's seat for a win if we do our normal, even anywhere close to our normal defense. That wasn't the case.
Right, so it was a combination of, like you said, rotations that they're, uncomfortable with, or at least not that familiar with, or not as effective, let's say, when you've got LeBron closing out, from the painted area, as opposed to going from one perimeter player to another. But on top of that, they just looked bad defensively. You know what they look like, Bruce? And this is like, I'm not huge on body language, all right? I'm not like, I kind of mock people sometimes when they just make big judgments based on body language or these sweeping assessments. But they looked, when I looked at LeBron and I looked at Chris Bosh in particular, looked like two guys that thought to themselves, this isn't what we should be doing. Because Chris Bosh, you already talk about him not really liking to play center to begin with, and then you put him in there against 7'2" Roy Hibbert, essentially the biggest force in the league in terms of size, maybe outside of Hasheem Thabeet, but he doesn't play a whole lot. You're putting him in that position to have to defend against him, and that, who knows what that does to him on the offensive end. But like we mentioned, he missed all 5 of his 3-pointers, missed those 2 early ones in the corner that really could have, really brought Hibbert out a little bit farther, and he finishes 4 for 12. I think that has something to do with the defensive responsibility you're giving him there with Roy Hibbert, at least to start games. And then LeBron James, again, he doesn't mind defending power forwards every once in a while. But if that's his initial responsibility, again, it could either take something out of him on the offensive end because it's so much work to do that down there, or it's just not what he likes to do. It's not what he's comfortable doing. And to me, I read them as saying, we shouldn't be doing this. And you even heard them before the series started, assuming Udonis Haslem was going to play, and I think everybody assumed Udonis was going to start.
Well, this is another – I looked at it differently, Izzy. I saw it from the standpoint of, man, look at how Indiana's playing right now, because they haven't played like that in the first game of any playoff series this season. So right. I think it was more or less like, man, we are in for a battle. Not that they came in not expecting a battle, but when Indiana starts off with George Hill hitting 3 threes in the first quarter, now we know the struggles that George has been in throughout the playoffs. But to see, it's almost like it was nothing worse, Izzy, as a player that you watch tape, you watch film, and there are certain guys around the league that they can't buy a bucket, but against you, they go 10 for 12. And so when you have those moments when a team is more efficient offensively, I think that was part of the confusion on behalf of the Miami Heat. I don't think it was more or less of the, man, we maybe shouldn't be doing it, because there's going to be times where that lineup is going to be good for them in short spurts.
Right. No, and look, I agree with you, and I wanted to sort of tackle the Heat first, and then we get to the Pacers. But, no, I'm with you. Like, obviously, the result is going to affect their body language and the way they're feeling. And obviously, when Indiana comes out and scores in the first quarter, what they get, 30 points in the first quarter, they're going to slump their shoulders a little bit more and say, man, this is ridiculous. They can't score 30 against anybody in a quarter, and yet they come out against us and score 30. But I think it was, like I said, it was because of that choice offensively. Like, to me, if you just go the Pacers, look at them all season long, all playoffs long. They're not an offensive juggernaut. They're just not. So if you just go traditional on defense, just traditional, you're going to be able to defend them better. Now, that was a team that moved the ball as good as I've seen them move the ball and shot the ball as well as I've seen them shoot the ball, but that's because they had open shots. And there was a couple of Lance Stevenson step backs, kind of type of shots that you kind of encourage him to take because they were long twos.
You live with that.
Exactly. But if that was the only one, that'd be a different story. But you also had George Hill, like you said, getting 11 points in the first quarter. You had Paul George hitting threes. You had C.J. Watson hitting 1. Go ahead, Bruce.
And it seems just like, it was that they were so late in their rotations. I'm talking about Miami. In this, that's what we talk about them being, that Ravens defense back when they beat New York in a Super Bowl. I mean, they swarmed everywhere. That's what we're accustomed to seeing from Miami. for these guys to get the wide open looks that they were getting, Izzy, that's where it was more or less, I think, more confusion than anything else as far as, hey, who was supposed to go out and get that guy? Okay, all right, well, if you take out that guy, then I'll go get this guy. It wasn't that way. They kept getting these wide open looks, and it just, it showed. They shot over 50%, Izzy, but Miami did not bring the heat to the battle, and we're accustomed to seeing them bring it, but they didn't bring it, and because of that, you look at the way that the game goes. You can't rely on your offense during the course of playoffs, period. You got to have some defense, because in the long run, that's what they've built everything upon, is their defense, and if you chose to go offense this game, then this should be a lesson to you.
All right, now before we go over to the Pacers a little bit, a couple of guys on the Heat that I think really need to step up their game. One, Chris Bosh, as we mentioned, like last year averaged, 11-4 against this team, didn't shoot it particularly well. During the regular season hasn't been great. And, while I do think that defending Roy Hibbert in this one sort of affected his play altogether, and on the offensive end, he just needs to find a way. Like, he needs to hit those threes. He hits threes against other teams. He had 4 against Brooklyn in the closer, the series clincher, and just hasn't been showing up against Indiana, at least not on the offensive end. He needs to do that. The other guy I think is Mario Chalmers. He's just been off. He's just been off. He's 1 for his last 9 from 3. He's been doing other things a little bit, but that when his offense is problematic, then his temper kind of gets in the way, and you saw that unnecessary flagrant. You know what, Bruce? I'm not even going to get into it because I don't understand the 4 to make 3 rule that they tried to explain to us on television, and why he got 3 free throws and had 4. I don't even know. I'm telling you right now, I don't know, but I'll tell you something else. In our lifetimes, we might never see it again, so it's not really worth discussing. But so Mario Chalmers is the other guy, and then I'll say this much about Ray Allen. Offensively, he's fine. Defensively, he's a liability at times, but the Heat have no other options. They can't, like somebody texted me during the game, said, why is Ray Allen still in there in the second half if he's not hitting shots? Where are they supposed to go? Shane Battier was getting beat off the dribble too. He's not he wasn't shutting anybody down on the perimeter.
Yeah.
You're going to go to Norris Cole at the 2 spot. You can't go there. You're not going to go to Tony Douglas. James Jones played 4 minutes and was a non-factor. You got to go with Ray, and when Ray's competitive on the ball, that's as much as you can ask, and he's been at that. So to me, Ray defensively has to really be on it, and then Mario Chalmers and Chris Bosh really have to show up if you're the Miami Heat and you have a chance to take this game too.
I look at Chris Bosh's disposition in this, Izzy, and it's difficult because you look at teams that Chris has to defend a big or battle down low with a big, you see his offense kind of taper, and he shoots jump shots, and so it's not like he's on the block getting constant touches like he did when he was in Toronto. So I understand he has to figure out a way where he can conserve and not waste energy and utilize his strengths more than anything else. Then you got Mario Chalmers, as you said, Izzy, and I know I'm just piggybacking off what you said, but you have to keep your composure, especially you're a 2-time champion now. It's uncalled for some of the things that take place with Mario. Everyone knows you're under the radar of the officials, so you can't do anything. So that being said, you shouldn't ever get into any altercation now because you're being watched. Those are the things that are so frustrating, I think, for coaches, for fans, for teammates, when you have a player that everyone knows, okay, look, man, they're watching you. And then on the offensive end, you have to pick and choose your spots in a way where you can be productive. Sometimes I think Mario gets into his own head and thinks he has to show and prove to everybody else that he's just as good as the big 3 there. It's not about that. Don't worry about that. Continue doing what you do and let the game take care of itself. We wouldn't be saying these things if Mario Chalmers wasn't the type of player that could be better, especially in these moments. So it's not that we're picking on him. We understand the young man has talent, and it's about him displaying that talent and letting all the other stuff go by the wayside.
Right. You guys can reel him in. He might have a moment here or there, but he's not a regular problem like, let's say, a Lance Stevenson is, and let's just say Lance Stevenson was the opposite of a problem yesterday. 8 for 12, 8 assists, 17 points, only 2 turnovers. Here was Lance talking about how basically easy the game came to them.
G Hill started off coming out, hit 2 big threes, and then we played off of that. Then D West started going, then Roy, then me and PG, and then that's how when we play like that, and no matter who's scoring and who's shining, I mean the game come easy for us.
I mean, it's absolutely true. You just saw a team that looked like it was very comfortable moving the ball, making big shots, or making every shot, it felt like, for a while there in that first half, and just making offense look easy, which is the exact opposite of what they normally do, especially when a guy like Hibbert's a non-factor and he's just kind of out there. But, you know, as we saw last year, we saw seemingly every time Miami plays the Pacers, Roy Hibbert takes advantage of the Heat's scrambling defense because he can just sit there in the post and either get it pass on a duck-in or, you know, an offensive rebound because he's free underneath the rim, and that's always going to be a problem for Miami. But it's, you know, when David West goes 8 of 11, when Lance Stevenson goes 8 of 12, when Paul George is, you know, hitting half his threes and still dishing the ball out for 7 assists, that's when, you know, Miami looks and says, wait a second, either we're not playing defense or that's the best offensive team in the league. What happened? What do you think is the main ingredient to get all this going? Normally I would say it's Paul George doing a good job of distributing, but to me it was Lance Stevenson who really got it started, really the proper pick and roll decisions and getting the Heat in rotations, and then from there it was just, you know, hit the open man and it's easy basketball.
Yeah, that's what happens, Izzy, when you get to a flow where everyone sees the ball is moving. It becomes infectious. So now you have guys actually looking for others, which is totally the opposite of what they were doing in the first 2 series in game ones. So when you get that going and you see the benefits of that, it only encourages a guy like Lance Stevenson to be that player that we were talking about that should have possibly been an all-star, or more importantly, a most improved player of the season. So he sees that, and he's the type of individual now, he's young, so when it's flowing for him, it allows him to do it even more so. It's funny, but you know that was the whole kit and caboodle of the whole game for Indiana. It was the ball movement, it was the defense, and when they get to play like that, the game is very easy. But we can always say it's easy when guys are making shots. So it's about being consistent and continuously trying to replicate those type of performances.
Do you think that they can continue that? You know, obviously the Heat's going to make adjustments. Udonis Haslem's probably going to play more. You know, they're going to have probably a little bit more frantic, desperate tone to them. If that's the case, does this one game really keep the confidence going with the Pacers, or do you see still that schizophrenic type of personality coming out of them potentially again? Because, again, we haven't seen, 2-3 quality offensive games in a row from them during this postseason. Do you anticipate that staying the same, or do you anticipate Miami sort of putting up a significant amount more of resistance in this next game on Tuesday?
No, you know what, Izzy? We cannot say what we're going to see with the Indiana Pacers. Exactly. It would surprise me. It would surprise me if they came out with the same effort and of course shooting efficiency. It's you got to give them credit for shooting over 50% the way they did. I don't know if you're going to have games where Lance and David West, the way they shot the ball, but it'll be interesting to see how they bounce back if they, with how they will respect their victory here against the Miami Heat. I think the Heat will be better next game. I think it was one of those games, Izzy, where I didn't feel like they came in with that bunker mentality and they were ready to steal game one. I think that had a lot to do with the way Indiana played in that game. And so this here game is very pivotal for the Indiana Pacers. But, even if they win the game, it's still something that they're supposed to do, and it's such a long time to this series before we really start being able to delve in and crack what's going on. It's all about the adjustments now. I do think that Udonis will play more, and he'll give them energy. He'll give them something that has kind of been missing for them from the inside, or should I say the interior defense of what Miami Heat does.
Yeah, they kind of came out with the sort of like a boxer, just sort of feeling out the first round or so, and they've done that before. I mean, they've not that this is why they've lost 4 previous game ones in playoff series in the Big Three era, but they've lost games ones before. They've come back to win all of those series where they've lost game ones in the Big Three era. But this one has a different feel to it. It feels like Miami was the one who has to figure out how to win, as opposed to the Pacers, who basically if they stick to their being big, which they're gonna continue to be big, but also move the ball on the offensive end. They have sort of a formula that they know they can go to. The problem is if they miss a couple of shots, will they get panicky? Will they stop moving the ball? Will Paul George or Lance Stevenson start to try to do too much? Let's say if George Hill doesn't start off well, or if Lance doesn't shoot the ball well from the outside, or if Roy or David, aren't as effective in the middle, then maybe guys will start to panic, and maybe that offense won't be as smooth as it was in game one. But you've got to put, in my opinion, I said this already, you got to put Udonis Haslem in there. If you look at the score, the Heat were outscored by 19 when Roy Hibbert was on the floor. They were +8 with him off the floor. So you've got to also attack. You can't be hesitant. You really have to force the referee to make that decision on, verticality or not. See if you can get Roy Hibbert in foul trouble, whatever the case may be. Because that, I think, was obviously the biggest factor, was the free throw line. The Pacers +22 advantage in free throw attempts. It's the second largest advantage they've ever had in a playoff game, ever. And they converted and attempted more free throws in the third quarter than the Heat had in the entire game. And it's not a flukish situation, or it's not one of those home court situations. I mean, save for, I can remember one kind of questionable call on Chris Anderson. Other than that, it was the Pacers being the aggressors, the Pacers just being smarter offensively, and drawing fouls. And the Heat, against that big team with that big front line, just wasn't attacking as much. And you saw LeBron getting to the line over and over again in that New Jersey series, double figures regularly, double figures in every game against the Bobcats. All of a sudden against this team, he puts up 18 shots, but only gets 2 free throw attempts. So Miami needs to be more aggressive, but it's going to be difficult for them against this Pacers team to get to the foul line if you're not making them move, if you're just sort of standing there or letting them stand in the paint and contest your shots. So it's going to be quite the challenge for Miami. But Bruce, if you were to use your powers of prediction here, what do you think happens in Game 2 in terms of Miami's adjustments and in terms of just the outcome of the game?
Yeah, I think that Miami will make an adjustment, Izzy, and I think you'll see more of a focus of defense, and that's one of the good things. Sometimes when you're off, it's hard to dictate things when you're getting those shots and you're just not making them. That's when you tend to worry. Do we have enough? Do we have guys that can make shots on our team? I don't think that's the concern right now for the Miami Heat, nor should it be. But it is the defense. They have to get their defense back. They have to play in the way that they've played in the past. They got to get that defensive energy back up. I think it's all about certain adjustments. And when you have players like Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, and LeBron James, they understand it more than anyone else. They've been in this situation more than anyone else, I believe, out there in this present time. So the thing that I worry about with Indiana is being at home and the performance that they've had, because they've been such an emotional team this season, is to feel like, okay, we got it. We found our mojo. It wasn't gone. This is what it is. And to come out and kind of not have that same type of focus where they're playing for one another. I don't know if they'll come back with that same attitude, Izzy. So with those things taking place, those are my concerns. And I think Miami wins Game 2 because of the necessary adjustments that are made in adding Udonis into the lineup and getting more production on the defensive side, which will lead them into getting more transition baskets as well as being more of a lockdown team tomorrow night.
I don't know if Miami's going to win, but I know they're going to treat it as if it was probably like Game 6 in Boston a couple years ago. They're going to treat it like, their playoff lives depend on it because they have not been down 2-0 in a series and, probably don't want to test how they're going to respond to that. Because, if you lose Game 2 in Indy, you go down 2-0, that Game 5 assuming you can hold your own home court, that Game 5 is going to feel like a Game 7. And then if you get to Game 7, it's going to be a Game 7 on the road, and it's going to be exactly what Indiana wants. So you want to get that first win. You want to get that win on the road as early as possible. They didn't do it in Game 1. They're going to treat Game 2 as if it's almost necessary to win that game. Like I said, don't know if they're going to win, but I think it'll be a closer game, a lower scoring game. We should also mention Evan Turner missed Game 1 with strep throat. He's probably going to be back by Tuesday, at least Coach Vogel says. Hopefully he's back by Tuesday. I don't think it's hopeful. I think it's, hey, take all the time in the world, because they don't necessarily need what Evan Turner does. Rasul Butler didn't give them anything in the minutes that he played in terms of offense, but you might as well have him out there spreading the floor and being a threat than having Evan Turner coming in and trying to create when they were just fine with their 23 assists yesterday. But we're going to take a quick break. We saw the Pacers take care of business. We'll see if the Spurs can do the same thing. We'll talk about that series in just a second.
Is there anything worse than buying razors? You've got to drive to the store, find a parking spot, find the locked plastic razor fortress, and the one guy who has the key is on break. Then, when you finally get to the register, it's $20. Madness! Don't put yourself through that. Join DollarShaveClub.com for a couple of bucks a month. DollarShaveClub.com will ship amazing quality blades and other cool bathroom stuff right to your door. Every month, like clockwork, you get a package in the mail with everything you need for a great shave. Their blades are just as good as the big boys at a fraction of the price. Not an everyday shaver? Join the club and opt for delivery every other month. With DollarShaveClub.com, there's no more trudging to the store for overpriced blades, no more cutting up your face by squeezing too many shaves out of that last blade in the pack, and most importantly, no more plastic razor fortress. They've got more than razors too. You got to try their Dr. Carver's Easy Shave Butter, the best thing you can put on your face before shaving it. Join me, everyone, at NBA Lockdown and the hundreds of thousands of guys who have upgraded to the smarter way to shave. Shave time, shave money. Join DollarShaveClub.com/Bruce. That's DollarShaveClub.com/Bruce.
What makes the Indy 500 the greatest spectacle in racing?
Back home again.
And we are playing. Everyone in the grandstands are on their feet.
Now the winner of the Indianapolis 500, my friend.
The Indianapolis 500, Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on ABC.
Guys are going to have to step up. That's the name of the game. That's what happens in this league. Injuries happen. We've got to get back in transition. They've been pushing them a lot. Control the 3-point line. And just man up on defense.
That was Kevin Durant discussing how his team's going to try to beat the San Antonio Spurs without Serge Ibaka, who's likely out for the entire remainder of the playoffs, with an injury that, Bruce, I was reading this, and I was a bit surprised, just a little nugget here. Only 85% of people have whatever muscle it is that he ended up injuring. It's actually, not muscle, whatever body part it was. It's not in front of me right now. I'll look it up. But whatever body part it was, there's like 15% of the population that just literally don't have it. So I thought that was really weird. But unfortunately, Ibaka's one of the 85%, and he did get hurt. And it's going to be interesting because everybody talks about how much of an impact defensively he has against San Antonio in particular, because he can protect the paint so well, because he's so athletic down there, because the Spurs, outside of maybe Kawhi Leonard, don't have an athlete that's just going to rise up and finish over anybody. And Serge Ibaka can be that intimidator, and therefore those perimeter guys can stick to San Antonio's three-point shooters even better. Now, I had the opportunity, Bruce, to change my pick, which was Oklahoma City in 6 after the Ibaka injury. I did not change my pick. It's probably because I'm a little stubborn, a little like Eric Spoelstra stubborn. And I do think that with Steven Adams, with other big bodies in there, or if the Thunder were forced to go small, let's say with maybe a Jeremy Lamb out there or Perry Jones, I do think that they can still sort of implement the same game plan. Now, it won't be as effective if you don't have a guy like Serge Ibaka, who can really shut down the middle, or can really, on any random night, give you as much as 20, 25 points. But you do have options, and I do think the Thunder behind Durant and Westbrook can still win this series. But we think the main difference is going to be for the Spurs when they don't see Serge Ibaka out there on the floor.
Izzy, I don't think that the Spurs are looking at this like, oh, good, okay, Ibaka's gone. All right, now we got it made. And I'm not saying that that's what you're saying. There's still so many players on that squad. You look at Reggie Jackson and the series he's had against the San Antonio Spurs this year, averaging over 20 points, or I believe it's 20 points, but shooting over 50% from the over 50% from the field. I mean, come on. You have to deal with the attacking guards, and that's Russell Westbrook, it's Kevin Durant, it's Reggie Jackson. Now you throw in Caron Butler. When we talk about defense, it would be different if San Antonio depended so much on the interior offense, like say 10 years ago. But that's not the team. They're a perimeter-oriented team that can get good production out of the block, out of the post. And so I think with all the pressure that the Oklahoma City Thunder provides, that's the issue. It's not necessarily Ibaka. It's more about how can they stop the onset of Russell Westbrook at the rim, or Reggie Jackson at the rim, or even Kevin Durant in pick and rolls. So now you got Caron Butler, who's a veteran who understands how to play. You have Derek Fisher as well. Then, Jeremy Lamb. Will he show up? Will he get a chance to play this series? I think it's important for people to continuously understand that with Jeremy Lamb, he was awesome with Russell Westbrook out. But he hasn't been able to find time on the floor, but this is an opportunity for him. I think Adams will fill in the void pretty well as far as the athleticism, maybe not to the degree of what Serge brings, but he brings something out there. And I just think the Spurs' hands are still full, and it's even more of a desperate situation for Oklahoma, because now they'll be even more focused going against a team that, that is solid. They respect the Spurs, and because they respect the Spurs, that's how they were able to beat them like they did after losing the first two games a couple of seasons ago.
All right, so let's, go to who Oklahoma City still has left. And that, of course, you mentioned Durant and Westbrook. I don't think anybody in the league can do to Durant what Tony Allen did to Durant. However, if you want to talk about quality individual defenders, wing defenders, Kawhi Leonard is up there with some of the best, with any of the best in the league. However, Kevin's got his sort of groove going ever since he picked up that MVP trophies. He's had one or two bad games in that mix, bad shooting games, but for the most part, seems like he's back to being the Kevin that we all recognize. During the regular season, 26 points he averaged against the Spurs, and that team went 4-0, but that actually was the lowest average he had against any team he's played more than twice. So, he's averaging 32 in these playoffs. Do you think Kawhi can be enough of a nuisance to affect Kevin Durant, or do you think Durant really puts the burden on his shoulders in terms of making up for Serge Ibaka by trying to go out there, score 40 a game and being successful and being efficient with it? Like, where do you see the Kevin Durant falling in this series? Is it the guy who's going to look like the MVP, or is Kawhi and that Spurs defense going to do some sort of number on him and keep him struggling a little bit?
Well, they're going to have to try to come up with something from a team defensive scheme, Izzy. No one can guard him one-on-one. We get that. But it's the pick and roll that he's been able to excel at, against the Spurs as far as reading the situation. There's times he comes off that pick and roll, he has Kawhi on his back or on his hip, and if Tim is too low, he can raise up without anybody affecting the shot because he's so long. But if Tim is up, I've seen Kevin go past him with his length and score the basket. So it's one of those, it's a serious juggernaut, Izzy, because of what Kevin Durant presents. I mean, I've talked about him handling the ball like a guard in pick and rolls. And then, just when you kind of relax a little bit, he can raise up over guys. No one's going to affect his shot. I don't think he's going to go for 40 a night because of the absence of Serge Ibaka. But I do think he's going to be even more efficient and get others involved, realizing that he can get his points at different moments. He always has an opportunity to score and put the pressure on the defense. But if he can get other guys shooting the ball well or present other opportunities for others to succeed, and when you can do that, you don't necessarily have to worry about carrying the load of somebody that's not there at that particular moment. I think this is an opportunity for someone else to step up, but I don't know how the Spurs are going to look to say shift their defense to really try and keep Kevin Durant off the foul line, number one, but also out of the lane. And it's really hard to take anything away from him without having to deal with the counter to it.
All right, so Tony Parker's got a hamstring pull that, they say he's fine. They say he'll play. It was a grade 1 sprain in Game 5 against the Portland Trailblazers. However, that's got to be in the back of your head. You're Tony Parker, in the back of your mind, especially to me, if I'm Russell Westbrook, every shot that goes up by the Spurs, I'm leaking out early and hoping to get a quick outlet pass and forcing Tony Parker to chase me as much as possible, run him hard. Now, unlike Lance Stevenson, Russell's not going to say as much and point to Tony Parker's injury, but he probably will try to run him as much as possible. He'll have help guarding Russell Westbrook, but in all likelihood will have to, guard Russell on the perimeter as well. How do you see Parker hanging, through this hamstring injury? He's played with some nicks and pulls and annoying little injuries here and there, but how can he do that against this athletic team? How do you think he'll hold up?
That's the biggest question, Izzy. When you're talking about a hamstring injury, as soon as you explode or as soon as you burst, you turn to run, that's when you could possibly tear the hamstring. So you can't play cautious during that time as well. So that's one of my concerns. Even though Serge is out, I said, well, it's almost like an even playing field because Tony Parker is dealing with a hamstring injury. With other nicks, a sprained ankle, that, okay, it's a sprained ankle, let's tape it up tighter. You can't necessarily tape up a hamstring tighter to the point where you start cutting off circulation. So, it's interesting that, how Tony starts out. If he goes to get by him in a pick and roll, it doesn't take much for you to feel that little pull, and that little pull can do enough where it puts doubt into your head and you're just not 100%. You hate the fact that it comes down to this and the team's not 100%. So I really need to see how Tony starts the process as he goes out to play tonight.
This is going to be interesting. Especially with Serge Ibaka out, you're going to get more minutes from Nick Collison or Steven Adams, and then that's going to take a little bit away from their bench. The Spurs, meanwhile, their bench is averaging nearly 40 points a game in the playoffs, best in the league. It could be, that second group. Either, you're going to need more minutes from Durant and Westbrook and your starters, or you're going to need to rely on that second group to sort of keep pace. And that means, Reggie Jackson, that means Caron Butler. That means those guys really need to not only score and keep the pace up, but maybe limit that bench for the Spurs, which has been so effective. So that's going to be another thing to look at. But there's going to be a million things to look at in this series. I think it's going to be, while the Heat-Pacers has that natural sort of clash of styles, even though it didn't really look that way in Game 1, there's so many different elements to this series that you can point to, that you can have fun analyzing, and I think, Game 1 is going to be wildly interesting because of that. But it's not all about the playoffs right now, believe it or not. There's a certain superstar, a guy named Kevin Love. I don't know if you want to call him a superstar. Let's call him a star. Kevin Love, who apparently is giving all indications he wants out of Minnesota. Let's discuss that.
Certainly the Golden State Warriors with David Lee, Klay Thompson, Harrison Barnes. Draymond Green is a player I know the Wolves like, and some other pieces. I think the Warriors can present an interesting option. I think the Houston Rockets will make an offer. I think the New York Knicks certainly have interest. I think the Chicago Bulls are an interesting team with some of the pieces they have. I would want a top 5 pick. I think the Boston Celtics make a ton of interest. Let's say the Celtics don't move into the top 3. Let's say Boston ends up at pick 5. You take pick 5, you get Boston's pick in a couple years, whether it's Jared Sullinger, Avery Bradley, even a Jeff Green, you can put together some nice pieces there, plus that top 5 pick where you could draft a power forward, somebody like Aaron Gordon of Arizona, Julius Randle of Kentucky. So you combine that guy with 3 or 4 other pieces, I would say that's a pretty good return if you know you're losing Kevin Love.
That was Darren Wolfson of 1500 ESPN in Minneapolis on the SportsCenter All Night with Jay Reynolds. So here you go, Bruce. You've got Kevin Love saying he's going to test the free agency market next offseason, so he's not, or wants to, so he's not going to sign an extension. If you're the Minnesota Timberwolves, that kind of tells you he's not going to stay. You have to, at the very least, consider strongly for the first time really trading him. And, you know, the longer you wait, it feels like the less leverage you have, because if you try to wait till about, let's say, trade deadline time, teams know you're going to be desperate. If you try to go the sign and trade route after the season, teams know that they actually don't have to do anything for you or with you. They can just sign him as a free agent if they're capable of doing that, if they're under the cap enough. So all indications are Kevin Love has or will be traded. To me, Bruce, I know you're going to be shocked here, okay? I've said this several times before. I said it after Steve Kerr got the job. I even texted Stan Van Gundy this while he was interviewing. I don't know if it was exactly while he was interviewing, but right around when he was interviewing with Golden State, I think they need to trade for Kevin Love. To me, you need to start off by offering Harrison Barnes and David Lee and a draft pick in the future. They don't have one this year, so it would have to at least be next year's. But I don't think Minnesota would bite on that. I think you got to go Klay Thompson, David Lee, and a draft pick, a first-round draft pick, and get Kevin Love back. And then you're starting a lineup of Steph Curry, Harrison Barnes, Andre Iguodala, Kevin Love, Andrew Bogut. Go get yourself a championship, Steve Kerr. What do you think, first of all, before we start playing GM, what do you think about Kevin Love not signing an extension? Obviously, you know, all these players have these rights. It's called free agency for a reason. They don't have to sign an extension, but 6 years, no playoffs. Kevin Love seems to be implying, hey, Minnesota is not going to get me to the playoffs. Other people say, hey, Kevin Love, you need to get Minnesota to the playoffs. It can't be the other way around. Is this just, you know, a marriage that's just not going to work out because of the lack of success, or do you think Kevin Love is more responsible for it than, you know, his numbers would say?
I was talking with Ozzie Smith yesterday, Izzy, and he talked about something that's missing today is commitment in any relationship. You just don't have it. And, you know, when I look at this whole ordeal with Kevin Love, I mean, he's not committed to the team. You know, it's one of those deals where I'm not happy, I'm gone. You know, I wish we had that type of player mindset that says, you know what, I'm willing to build here because you all have given me an opportunity to be an all-star, to be the best I can be. I don't want to become that here and then just bolt on you and leave you in disarray. Now, on the flip side, I understand it is a business and players have to look out for themselves. He feels like they're not making the right decisions in order to get what's necessary as far as moving up into playoff category, I guess. But my personal opinion is I wish it wasn't about him now going to Flip Saunders, who I know is a solid individual, and saying, I want out. I wish there's a better way of him sticking it out and helping that team become a contender. Now, that I've said all that, Izzy, it still remains to be seen on if he can make a team better. Even if he goes to a team that's established, does he just score for himself, or does he actually enhance the play of other guys? We've talked about his empty 30-point games, his 40-point games, all the things that he's been able to do from a scoring standpoint, but you still lose. And I just don't know if he has that ability to affect his teammates where he makes guys around him better as compared to just having solid numbers for himself.
Yeah, I actually think that that's the main reason he wants out. It's not necessarily because he doesn't think he'll ever win with Minnesota. I just think he wants to show as soon as possible that, look, dang it, I can contribute to a winning team. My numbers aren't empty. I'm tired of the debate. You guys remember when Tyson Chandler said that, Kevin Love doesn't play defense, and, Kevin Love's response to him was, let's just say it was not child-friendly, and it was very brief, and it was 2 words, 7 letters total, so figure it out. But basically, he wants out of there for that reason. He just wants to prove, what type of player he is, as opposed to having that be a debate. Now, in terms of where he could go, I mentioned Golden State. Bruce, there's also, a possibility of Chicago in terms of a team that reportedly he would be interested in going to via trade. Now, what's interesting about Chicago is, they're probably going to, they're going to get Derrick Rose back. What you're going to get out of him, you have no idea, because the last couple of years he's obviously had some serious knee issues. You would assume, coming off of this one, that he would be more like his usual self next year. They do have some cap space, so they can sort of, they probably will if they, assuming that they amnesty Carlos Boozer, so they can absorb his contract without giving away that much, basically, in a trade type of situation. Which destination would seem most attractive to you? Would it be a Golden State situation? Would it be Chicago, where he's in the East and doesn't have a bunch of teams to leapfrog like Golden State would have to do? Or is it another team out there that you think could be a really good fit for him?
Well, it's all about, what you need more than anything else. And I think you talked about Golden State. I think his ability to score on the block helps him out a great deal. Now you would have, of course, David Lee wouldn't be there, but you have Steph from the outside and also a guy who could stretch the floor. I think that would be interesting for Golden State. I don't see it being so interesting for Chicago, Izzy, because you have a guy that gives you empty buckets in Carlos Boozer. So I just don't see it necessarily the same. I know that he might be a little more talented than Carlos is scoring, but you basically have the same. Yeah, Izzy.
Listen, you can call him empty. Call him empty or not.
Salty.
Carlos Boozer last year gave you 13.5 and 8 rebounds. You put in Kevin Love, he can double those numbers. He can literally double those numbers. He could give you 27 and 16. Now, that would be a lot, but he could give you that big a number. So I think that would make a huge difference.
Yeah, but see, now it's such uncertainty there in the way that their offense is, and if who knows, his offense might suffer in a defensive system. So, I don't know. It remains.
I'll
to be
say this
seen
much: it would be quite intriguing to see a Derrick Rose, Kevin Love pick and roll. Because where are you going to go? You help off Kevin Love, he's gonna knock down the three. You give Derrick Rose any bit of space if he's his athletic self. His old athletic self, he's going to get to the rim. Joe Noah really knows how to play the game the right way. So does Kevin Love. Big-to-big passing would be pretty darn impressive. So, we saw how he worked with Pekovic out there, and Joe Kim's sort of a different kind of animal and better at, obviously passing the ball too. So that would be equally as intriguing, and, we'll see. We'll see what happens there. I think that Kevin Love in Chicago would be a better fit than Carmelo in Chicago, so there's that also. But I'm excited to see the possibilities with, we give guys grief about this all the time, and Kevin Love is going to get his share, and he should, for not sticking with the team and blah, 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 whatever you want to call it. But we've seen everybody do it, from Carmelo to LeBron to, Chris Bosh. All these players have done it, so it's sort of Kevin Love's turn, and he'll get everything that comes with it. But I think it will be intriguing, not only to see him in another uniform, but to see how his game really translates in a winning situation. I think it's going to translate just fine. That's going to do it for this edition of the NBA Lockdown Podcast. For Bruce Bowen, I'm Israel Gutierrez. Enjoy this Game 1 with Oklahoma City and the Spurs, and Game 2 on Tuesday between the Heat and Pacers. We will talk to you again on Wednesday.
Thanks for listening to the NBA Lockdown. For more great podcasts, visit the Pod Center page at ESPNradio.com.
What makes the Indy 500 the greatest spectacle in racing?
Back home again.
We are free. Everyone in the grandstands are on their feet. You're now the winner of the Indianapolis 500, my friend. We
Indianapolis 500, Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on ABC.